Okay. Right, nice to see you all. Thank you for dialing in. Um, it occurred to me this was about last year, about this time last year when I was planning out my year, that because I'm a bit of a nervous cross-country flyer, I wanted to uh, try and make a bit more use of the lakes task that had been mentioned a number of times to me. And if I was honest, I hadn't really taken the time to look at it in detail, and so that's what I did. And of course, then we had the lockdown, but I was still into this planning stage and looking for it. And I thought, well, if I'm getting benefit out of this, why not put it together as something that could be more readily used um, by members of the club, and also trying to sort of fire up a bit more interest in the club ladder as well, which again I've never taken part in because I didn't really understand much more about it. But as a consequence of the last few talks that we've had, we seem to be talking about cross country and getting people into a way of thinking about cross country. And I thought, well, we'll put this together. I've spoken to Peter, Gill, and Derek about this, and to Paul Witters as well, about putting this, and it seemed to be something that would have been of interest. So that's the background to putting up this this presentation together. So the Lakes Challenge, it was developed by Derek and Peter some years ago now, and it is, as far as I'm aware, has not been really fully taken up by many people. But its objective was to encourage people in the initial steps to flying cross country more confidently, and to promote exploration of the local area with a clear purpose and a sense of achievement, and to develop navigational skills and allow the safe exploration of glider performance under different weather conditions. As we all know, if you've got a strong wind day, then your into-wind penetration is going to be quite as good as if it was a lighter wind day. So that sort of thing to be taken into consideration. So what, from my sort of rebooted aspect, what's different to the original principle? Well, the original principle was out and returns from the Seighford hangar turning point, which happens to be a BGA turning point as well, to a nominated lake and back again, which in itself is a challenge, and it's worth achieving. But what I've proposed as the revised principle is to still, to have out and returns, but we incorporated an appropriate safety margin when returning to base. So this allows the opportunity of trying these tasks out for people who are early solo pilots, or people at least that are before they've got their bronze and cross-country endorsement, to experience some of the rigor and the discipline required to perform a safe cross-country flight. The revised principle would also allow for the fact that you might want to do more than an out and return. You might want to do a number of lakes in one small task, which would still be maybe within gliding range for an early solo pilot, or a number of tasks, a number of lakes to be included in a task, but also to sort of reinvigorate this this exercise as a part of the club ladder, or maybe a separate lakes ladder. And maybe later on in this presentation, Peter could actually give us an idea of how we could do that and how we could incorporate that, if that's all right. So what have I done? I've regraded the lakes slightly based on their distance from from our airfield. And this was for a number of reasons, which will become clear as we go further on. And they were based on the ability for us to be able to glide straight back to base from that lake to a safety height. And what I've done is I've graded the lakes as follows. So there are 4 lakes that are graded as novice, and these are lakes that will allow the pilot to glide straight back to the airfield without much problem. And it would suit an early solo pilot who's learning to thermal and getting used to going somewhere and staying high. And for an intermediate, there's an intermediate level, which is encouraging the pilot to go between one thermal and another. So, for example, the novice might be able to get into a thermal and stay in that same thermal and get to, let's say, Coppermere, for example, and then glide straight back. And that would be an achievement in itself. But maybe then the intermediates might need to engage another thermal on the way. So transiting between two thermals, and gives them experience of that. Then we have advanced level, which is they've got more experience of transitioning between thermals and not of the other considerations that we would expect from an advanced pilot. And these are generally tending to be the bronze with cross-country endorsement. So they've got qualification to allow them to do field landings if necessary. And these lakes are more suited for people who have got that level of experience and can handle the increased workload necessary, because some of these areas of these lakes sit in areas that are close to or within airspace that we need to be aware of, or air traffic zones we need to be aware of. And there may be people who are learning or already know enough about navigation to be able to be far enough away from the field so it's not in sight, but know exactly where it is and how they can get back. And also be able to actively judge a glider's performance under different weather conditions. I've made a point here that said some lakes will require specialist briefing due to the local airspace considerations. And as we go through some of the examples, I'll show you what those ones are. And finally, the expert category, which is those pilots who can handle a greater workload with regard to managing radio and navigation and other air traffic, and managing airspace as well. So that was the way we've graded them. So looking at those in terms of the groupings of people who would be appropriate to use those particular lakes, the novice and intermediate would have a safety height of 2,000 feet. Now, what that means is that the whole point of this is to allow cross-country flying in a safe environment, which reduces the risk to everybody. So we have a safety height of 2,000 feet, and that means that on returning to the airfield, to the Seighford hangar turn point, the base height, the height that you can't break through, would be 2,000 feet. And if you get it wrong, it's not a big deal, because you can still either try and re-engage with a thermal and then have another go, or if the weather has deteriorated and it's not very thermic, you can cash in your chips and do some local soaring and come back and land quite safely without any issue. What it also means is the advanced and the expert categories of lakes should not be attempted by an early solo or a bronze or somebody who hasn't got a bronze and cross-country endorsement. And this is because those, excuse me, those lakes are far enough away that you could find yourself in a position where you would have to land out. So we are not recommending that for early solo, those lakes for early solo. But bronze, if you do have a bronze with a cross-country endorsement, this assumes that you have a current field landing selection already checked off. And for this, just for the Lakes Challenge, we declared a safety height of 1,000 feet, just for the purposes of our Lakes Challenge. And again, it's just to promote the ability of people to progress and to push themselves in a safe way, that they can get back to the field without causing themselves or the aircraft or anybody else any safety issues. So it's just been done so that it gives a comfortable margin of error whilst flying safely. That's the main consideration. And applying some rules, I'm just suggesting here that a rule could be that we don't award any points if any return to base height for that declared task is below the safety height. So, you know, we can be flexible on this. You know, if we like, it's up to our ladder steward to decide what is right and what is wrong on that call. But I would suggest it be something along those lines. And what it does, it just gets people into the discipline of being able to return to the airfield at a prescribed height without causing themselves any danger or difficulties.
Chris, we just
Yes.
have a question from Peter Check, as I call him. He's asking, the pre-bronze and cross country, does the lake need to be within 5 nautical miles?
Well, can we just park that question, Peter, and we'll have a look at that when we get to the description of where the lakes are and where the categories are. That will become clear in a moment, if that's okay. We're not saying that this is the start of your circuit. This is just purely for the purposes of the Lakes Challenge. So the recommended high key height is still 800 feet. And as I've said before, bronze with cross-country endorsement assumes that you're current in-field landing selection. So this is what it looks like in our little sort of patch that we've got on the left-hand side on this map. And on the right, we've got a table of all of the lakes that I've reordered. And this is what we're saying, Peter, the distance from the airfield for these purposes, the 4 lakes that are in the novice category are between, as you can see there, nearly 4.5 miles and 7.5 miles away from the airfield. And they are in that sort of distance away from us. So you can see there are the 4 lakes in the novice category. So then we have the intermediate category, which doesn't look that much further away, but it in fact is, as you can see there, the difference in the distance is only about 2.5 statute miles, about a mile and a half, 2 miles from the furthest one from the novice category. But again, this is just progressively pushing people's capabilities and skills with regard to judging where they are in relation to the airfield. Then we've got the advanced level, which is a bit of a wider jump. And as you can see, they're the ones that are much further away from the field. And as you can see, some of them sit within air traffic zones or near to air traffic zones. So they need a bit more care when they're being attempted. And finally, the experts, which are further out to field and require a bit more skill and judgment. Particularly if you're going to use those extremes for a triangle, for example, because you would have between, let's say, Lake 15, 14 and Lake 11, if you're going to do a triangle there, you've got to negotiate this part of the Birmingham CTA at some point. So that's why that's classed as being more of an advanced lake. And that's what it looks like on my cut and pasted various snapshots from my Sky Demon. But on the normal chart, it looks like this. So it's a bit more cluttered, which is why I used the other one. And it shows you where they would be on the normal airspace chart. So I just want to apply a health warning before I go through all of this. This is only for guidance. This isn't meant to be followed rigidly. It's meant to just give people an opportunity to explore things safely and have things to think about. You must always use an up-to-date chart for any attempt. I've said all attempts must be made under the supervision of an instructor. This is a standard for the instructing responsibility that below silver standard, the instructor is always responsible for all the flying on the field. So you need to inform the instructor if you're going to attempt any of these, so you can get a briefing if necessary. Also, the glider performance and weather conditions must be taken into account. It's taken as read. You know, if you're flying the Janus, it's got better legs on it than the K-13. You've got a different aircraft, you've got a different performance. You've got to take that into consideration, and also the prevailing weather conditions. And always ensure that you're in safe landing range of a safe landing area, whether that be our airfield or another field. If you're early solo, obviously you shouldn't be going further away than a safe gliding range from the field. And that's again the whole point of this this rebooting of the Lakes Challenge. So what I'm hoping to do once I get my colour printer fixed, it's decided it's going to put a horrible wavy line on the edge of all the colour prints that I'm making. But once I've done that, I'm going to do a hard copy of this and put it in the clubhouse in a folder and put it on the club computer as a presentation so that people can refer to it if they want to take this any further.
It's also worth mentioning I can put it up on the club YouTube channel as well, so people want to watch.
All right. Okay, good point. So what I've done is I've taken each of those lakes and I have applied certain. This is again what I was doing this myself, so I thought, well, I might as well present it as part of this presentation. And it's essentially a boilerplate of several bits of information that I thought would be useful to me and hopefully useful to anyone else who wants to do this. And basically it's what a favourable wind direction for that particular lake. Now that's not to say that that's the only wind direction that you can attempt the lake in. It's just a favourable one, particularly for people in the early stages. And generally it tends to be that you're going for a lake that's into wind so that you have more difficulty getting to the lake than you have to get back to the airfield. And again, as you get braver and more skilled with it, you can be doing several lakes and going maybe crosswind and downwind and into wind all in the same flight. Identification of the lake, so features of it, the shape of it, anything that's distinctive about the lake that would help you to identify it from anything else. Landmarks, things that surround the lake that will help you to identify it and make so you've got an idea that you're at the right place. Airspace, so anything that's significant about the flight level above the lake. And to be honest, there isn't really much of an issue with any of the lakes in the list that we've got. Local hazards, so anything like local airspace or helicopter pads or microlight sites, which you'll see in some of these slides later on. A return to base height. This is again with a big asterisk on it. These heights are based on a very conservative estimate of what a twin steer will do. And it's a height that would take you on a still wind day back to the airfield to a safe high key height of 800 feet. And there's a big sort of asterisk on all of that. You've got to be very careful with it, but it's just to give an indication. There's also a distance from Seighford, so it's a point-to-point distance in kilometres and miles, just to give an indication of the distance it is away from the field. A bearing from Seighford, so obviously a compass reading to the lake, and a reciprocal to Seighford, so the compass reading that you would need from the lake to support any preparation that you may be doing yourself. So I've used some approximations or rules of thumb. So 6,000 feet is roughly a nautical mile. So if we use that as our approximation, the twin steers glide ratio is roughly 30:1. Therefore, if from 6,000 feet, you could travel nominally 30 nautical miles. So from 1,000 feet, you could travel 5 nautical miles. And from 200 feet, a nautical mile, or from 100 feet, it's 100 feet per kilometre. And a kilometre is roughly half a nautical mile. So those are very rough rules of thumb. And we don't need to go into any more detail than that because, as we've already mentioned, weather conditions, the type of aircraft you're flying, your experience, and wind direction and speed all factor in to any of the details that are coming up. And the basics, so as we've said, if you're going to an upwind turn point, you're going to have a headwind, so therefore your ground speed is going to be slower and you'll cover less ground per hour. If you're going downwind to a turn point, you'll have a tailwind, you're going to be faster over the ground and you're covering more ground. And if you're on a crosswind, you've got a reduced headwind, you've got reasonable ground speed, but you have to lay off to keep to the track. So those are all just very basic stuff, just so that we've all got that in our minds when we go into the next stuff. So what this is also saying is, don't forget you've got your circuit height to consider when you're deciding what is the appropriate time to turn back to the field. And so if in nil wind, you would expect that from 1800 feet, you could get back to Seighford from Aqualate, for example, theoretically. So if it was an accurately held speed from 1800 feet to Aqualate, you could get back to Seighford High Quay at 800 feet. But again, don't forget, if you're talking about a nil wind situation, you could cover, let's say, 10 kilometers at 30 to 1. But in just 10 knots of headwind could reduce your achieved glide slope to 26 to 1 and drop you down to 7.6 kilometers. These are all very rough, but it gives you the idea that we need to consider the weather conditions when you're attempting any of these lakes. So now we're going to go on to the lakes themselves, and firstly looking at the novice lakes. Now, what I worked out was that if we were going to use these lakes to do some sort of competitive or some achievement that we want to add to our flying, we should put some rules. So those rules are for pre-bronze with a cross-country endorsement, return to base at 2,000 feet. All others return to base at or above 1,000 feet. So that's essentially the ruling. And it's, again, just to give everybody a safe way of trying these things out without causing themselves any concern or any danger. So let's just look at the 4 lakes in the novice class. We've got Chelmar, Aston Marina, Aqualate, and Chelmar Reservoir. So the first one, Chelmar, and it's, as you say, the boilerplate there shows the favourable wind directions northwest, and it's a circular oval in shape. It's west of Eccleshall. You've got 5,500 feet airspace above you, no local hazards. Return to base height for non-cross-country endorsements, 2,700 feet, and for anybody with cross-country endorsement, 1,700 feet, and the distances and the bearings there. So if we look at the actual air chart and where it appears on the air chart, you can see it's that little blue shape just to the west of Eccleshall there. That's what you're aiming for, and obviously you can see Seighford here. Excuse me. And it looks like this. It's a sort of roughly oval, sort of squarish looking lake, and it's quite easy to spot once you know where it's there, that it's there. But if you need any help, if you're following the road from Eccleshall, you'll see this. There's like a displaced crossroads here. So there are two sets of roads pointing towards the bottom corner of Chelmar. So it's relatively easy to spot. So the next one's Aston Marina. That's more to the northeast of us, and it's described as with like 2 straight-edged pools connected by a bridge. You can actually, if you drive past it, you can almost see when you go to from Stone to Sandon, you can see the area that we're talking about, and it's quite distinctive. And on the map, you can't really see it as a distinct lake, but you can you can judge where it is relative to Stone and to the road going between Stone and Sandon. Being aware that there's a helicopter landing pad around here somewhere, so in this sort of area you must be very careful of other traffic, rotary traffic. And that's what it looks like from Google's point of view. It's the A51 that goes to the roundabout at Stone and then goes to Sandon. And you will see, it'd be quite obvious when you see it, because you see all the canal boats lined up, and Nigel or Sarah might give us a wave from one of them. That's the Aston Marina one. Next ones are Aqua Lake Mere. Now I put this in. I mean, you can't fail to spot Aqua Lake Mere when you're west of the field. It's very visible, very clear to see. But for the purposes of completeness, I've filled this in as well. So it's very distinctive on the air chart, and you can see it's relative to the airfield and to Newport. It's aligned to the northwest, the southeast, and that's what it looks like. One thing I will mention, Aqua Lake's not perhaps a good example, but at different times of the year, there tend to be a lot of bloom or green algae on some of these lakes, and particularly the small ones. They can blend into the background, particularly at certain times of year. So be aware that you might not be able to see the lake itself until you're on top of it. You'll probably see the shape as a slight difference in colour. Aqua Lake did that a few years ago when part of it was covered by this green algae. But that is true. It could be true of all of the lakes that we're going to talk about here. Knighton Reservoir. So this is the last one in the novice series, and this is the furthest away, and it's almost on the edge of Turnhill military air traffic zone. Not in it, but it's just on the outskirts of it. So if we look at the chart, you can just see it there, just on the outskirts and just under the airspace boundary. There's the gliding club, so you've got Eccleshall, you've got under here, where is it? Under here somewhere, you've got you can't actually see it. The Aqua Lake Mere. So you can, and you've got Cottonmere as well. So you've got those ways of triangulating yourself to that particular lake. And it looks like this. It's a funny looking lake. It's quite a thin and narrow one, oriented virtually north to south. And that's got, again, it's got plenty of airspace above it. Straight glide back for non-cross country endorsed 3,200 and 2,200 if you have got a cross country endorsement. Again, these are just estimates. They're not set in stone. You have to take a judgment on the aircraft and the weather conditions at the time. So then we get on to the intermediates, which the rules are the same as for the novice in the respect that the return to base height should be above 2,000 or at or above 2,000 feet for the pre-bronze and cross country endorsements, and 1,000 for all others. And first one is Trenton Gardens. Now again, this is another one that's not very easy to spot on the aeronautical chart, but it is there, and it's abutting the road between Stone and Trenton, and it's quite easy to identify once you see it because it's got a I think it's 1 or 2 islands in the middle of it, and this this lovely Italian garden which is very geometric. So that's another good indicator. You also have 2 golf courses at the northwest and the southeast, or more east actually of the lake. So if you can see those golf courses, in between them there should be the Italian gardens, and you should be able to see it by then. So yeah, we've got a reduction in the airspace coming down to 4,500 feet just north of the lake. So if you were coming in from that direction, you'd have to bear that in mind. The straight glides are there, you can see, and the different bearings to and from. Mere Lake is north of the field. It's a bit more difficult to spot on the aeronautical chart. It's a tiny little dot just to the southwest of Baldwin's Gate, and that's the area that you want to be looking for. And this is one of those you can actually see in this picture where part of this lake has been obscured by the green algae. Try that again. Yeah, so if that was completely covered in green algae, it would blend in with the surrounding fields and crops at certain times of the year. The key thing is that you've got the A51, which is coming along the north of it, and a wooded area above that, and that should give you an indication of where the lake is if you find that difficult. And you also have these roads here, which are sort of encircling the lake, if you like. So it's relatively easy to spot. And you've got your about 3,500 for non-cross country and 2,500 for cross country endorsed pilots. Belvide Reservoir is a nice one, due south from the airfield. If we look at the chart, it's obscured by this diamond-shaped line and these the airspace boundaries, but it's there. It's just there in that little area there, to the southwest of Penkridge and southeast of Wheatnaston. So Wheatnaston is another one of those fields that we can see. It's like Hickson in the respect that it's quite obviously a disused airfield. And if you can find Wheatnaston and Penkridge and then Brood, you've probably got it in your sights and you know where it is. And it's an unusual one in the respect that it has a very straight side. I flew over this some years ago and was quite surprised at how straight that side of that lake is. You don't expect to see it. There is another straight edge on Blithfield Reservoir, which is where the dam wall is. But you've got another straight edge as well, straight line in the A5, which is part of, I think it's part of Watling Street, one of the Roman roads. So that's a very straight road to help you to identify it, and it's right next to that road. So again, another way of finding that particular lake. 4,500 feet of airspace. But there's 8,500 feet on the west shore of it, just to the west shore of it. So if you're approaching from the west or the south, then you've got a bit more headroom. And lastly, Gailey Reservoir, which is actually two lakes. It's two reservoirs. They're quite squared off and straight edged in their appearance. East of Junction 16. It's around here on your aeronautical chart. It's just nestled in between the M6 and the A5, and it's distinguishable by the fact it's got these straight edges and this causeway in between the two. I haven't actually been over this one, but it says that there's a sailing club there, so I would expect there would be evidence of sailing boats in that vicinity, I would think. Again, we've got 4,500 feet above. There is a microlight airfield quite close to it, so be aware of that. Not necessarily from a point of view of landing there, but more to do with the fact you've got small aircraft bumbling around that you might not be aware of, and might not have radio, so they might not be able to hear what you're saying if you do radio in. Straight glide 37 for non-cross country and 27 for cross country pilots. So then we get on to the advanced. So if you're wanting to claim the points, you shouldn't be tempting this if you're pre-bronze with a cross country endorsement. So if you're solo and pre-bronze. And all others return to base at or above 1,000 feet. So we've got Blithfield Reservoir, Rookley Pool, Donington Pool, Alton Towers and Patchell Pool. So we'll go through some of these. Blithfield Reservoir, we're probably all seen that Y-shaped reservoir to the east of us, 5,500 feet of airspace above us, although there's 4,500 to the south of the reservoir, and you've got Taton Hill to the east to be aware of. Straight glide back at about 3,000 feet to give you that 1,000-foot headroom when you get back, and it's about 20 kilometres, 12.5 miles away. And it's, again, very distinctive in the respect that it's got a road running, a major road running across the middle of it, and that's quite clearly visible in this picture here. But having said that, the shape of the reservoir itself is quite obvious that that's what it is. As you can see, there's that I was talking about earlier, this straight line at the one end at the dam wall, which if you look in that direction, that takes you towards Husbands Bosworth if you're doing the milk run. Ruckley Pool, right. Now then, I've got issues with Ruckley Pool because, for a number of reasons, this is the one that I found, I think I mentioned before about the algae. I was looking around on some satellite imagery and I couldn't find this, and then realised that it was covered in this green stuff. And it occurred to me that this could be a regular situation that might occur on some of these lakes because they're quite small. But also because if you look at the aeronautical chart, it doesn't actually show you that the lake is there, but that is the location of this particular lake, and it's right in the air traffic zone for Cosford. Now, we need to be aware that even though we may be above the airspace there, and that's is that 3,000 feet above? I think it's 3,000 feet from ground level. If we're above it, that's fine, but we still need to be aware that there may be traffic in circuit or on the dead side of the circuit in certain weather conditions. So we should.
Dead is 2,000 feet.
Is it? What's the G 3.3 then?
That's a winch launch permission.
Ah, right. Thank you. So if we're above that air traffic zone, we're not interfering with their flying, but it would be courtesy, I would suggest, to get in touch with Cosford to let them know what it is you're attempting, just so that they can exclude you and know that you know where you are, and that they know where you are, and they can alert any other traffic to your presence. So that was just one thing to be aware of on that one. Also, it's quite an odd one in the respect that it's a funny shape, but it's also changes shape from what I've seen from other photographs. This area around here is actually part of Ruckley Pool as well, and it seems to have like an overflow, or it may be being managed by some nature conservancy people to either extend or divert some of the water as it's coming through. I'm sorry about this. The screen keeps flicking over to the next thing before I'm ready, so I don't know why that's happening. But what this is, that blue circle there is where Ruckley Pool is. So this is just to give an indication of where it is relative to Cosford and other features such as the junction 3 of M54. There's also this dotted line here is the railway. There's an active railway going through Cosford and to Albrighton, I think, and further on and back to Wolverhampton. So that's where Ruckley Pool is. But there are some other pools around that if you were not quite sure where you were, you might mistake for Ruckley Pool if you didn't know what it looked like. And they are in these positions. There's one called Church Pool, which I'll show you in a minute. And there's one over here, which you can just about see, this little sort of dark area here, which is actually quite a lot bigger than Ruckley Pool. And I think is actually probably a better lake for us to use for this sort of challenge because it's out of the way of Cosford airspace and it's bigger and easier to identify. But that said, we can always change things going forward. Church Pool looks like this. It's virtually nothing. It's a little strip of water, but that isn't Ruckley Pool. And this is the one that also isn't Ruckley Pool. but is a lot bigger and a funny shape. I think it looks like a cat with an eye and a tail and an ear and in his nose and his feet down here, but that's just me. So that's just to make you aware of what isn't Rugby Pool isn't this one. It isn't this one. It is this one. And as I say, we can discuss and we can modify these things as we wish. We can discuss whether we think that's a better, with whatever that one's called, a better lake than the one at Rugby Pool and provides us with less potential risk and workload. So yeah, mentioned the air traffic clearance. Cosford is very easy to spot. There's a silver dome over the museum itself, which is very easy to see from quite a distance away. And if you do go for Rugby Pool, it's just northwest of that. Straight glide back at 3,100 feet to get you back at 1,000 feet. Doddington Pool is quite a push further north, nearly back to my stamping ground around Crewe. This is again another one. It's difficult to spot on the map because it's just under that airspace designator there. It's just there, and right next to the road that goes between I think it's Newport and Crewe. And this is what it looks like. Now, what I find strange about this particular picture is that there isn't a single trailer or boat or yacht on the water or on the banks either. This is a very busy sailing, a very busy sailing club. And whenever I've been past it, it's always got boats and trailers here with their canvas covers on. And when it's a decent day, there's always at least 10 sailing boats going around in this lake. Distinctive shape, looks a bit like a cartoon character with there's his mouth and there's his head and there's his eye, strangely positioned. But anyway, that's what that one looks like, quite a distance away from the airfield, or it appears to be, but it's only 15 miles, 25 kilometres. Airspace directly above 4,500 feet, but it goes down to 3,500 feet under the airway that goes to Manchester Airport. So be aware of that if you are either lost or you're going a bit further beyond Doddington. And the next one's Alton Towers, which is to our northeast. It's not really very well marked as a lake, but you can find Alton Towers on the aeronautical chart. And the lake itself is here. It's again not easy to spot on some of the pictures, but it also has this little a road bridge that goes over it, and there's another little lake on the other side, which is a boating lake. And of course, you can see all the rest of the theme park around it, and the hotels and the car parks is probably what you'll see more readily than the lake itself. 5,500 feet above it, there are some large quarries visible to the northeast, and there's a tall tower at one of the quarries. So if you've got that in your sights, you're on the way you're in the sort of area where you'll spot it. It's sort of northeast of Cheadle. So that should be fairly easy to spot. A straight glide from 3,700 feet roughly, and it's about nearly 17 miles. Patchell Pool is another one of those that need some care. It's a long, thin lake, which again is not very visible. Apologies for the quality of this particular scan, but it's not particularly visible, but it is there underneath that diamond-shaped dotted line. And it looks like this. It's a strange lake or series of lakes, including, as I said, with Ruffield, it looks as if it's being managed, and they're putting dams and dikes and whatever to control the flow of the water around the lake. So again, a difficult one to spot. It's again near to Cosford, their traffic zone. So if you're going to go anywhere near it, you should be advised, possibly it'd be wise to get in touch with them and let them know what you're attempting. And also, because it's in close proximity, the Cosford traffic, they could be flying away from the field, away from their airfield from Cosford, or going in or circulating round or in a pattern or whatever. So just be aware of that. And again, that's about 17 miles away from the pool. And the expert one, there's only 2 in that category, and they are at Ulrawas, which is near the National Arboretum, which is quite easy to spot. It's in this very congested area with regard to emblems and icons in this area. There's a bridge, there's a helicopter, supposedly a helicopter pad, which I haven't found or seen. And we all know about the gas venting station, which is something we should avoid if we're doing the milk run to Husbands Bosworth. So it's in that vicinity anyway. On the satellite picture, it's perhaps easier to identify if you find the National Arboretum first, which is here. It's got this sort of spiral memorial, spiral road that goes around to the top of this memorial, and all of these gardens and forests around that area. If you find that, then you've got the Ulrawas Reservoir, 4,500 feet above it. Be aware of the glass venting station, microlight and helicopter activity in that area. That's a bit further away, 21 miles. And the last one, the Chelmar Reservoir, which is towards Bridgenorth, and it is near to Halfpenny Green, so be aware of that as well. Loads of headroom for this particular one, so a final glide, excuse me, of 5,000 feet or above should see you getting back relatively swiftly, and that's the furthest away from the field. So interestingly, that is, say it's 40 kilometres or 25 miles. 40 kilometres, that's nearly a 50k. So you could argue, what's the point of doing that? If you're going to do 40 kilometres, you might as well do the 50 and get your silver if you haven't got your silver. But it could be for other purposes, because I'm aware that I'm talking here to people who are probably quite experienced in flying generally, and this is perhaps a bit beneath them. But for some of the more junior or less experienced pilots, this could actually be quite a useful or interesting challenge for them, either from a training point of view or as an individual challenge at whatever their level of skill is. So on this, on the aeronautical chart, it is quite clear where it is. It's just southeast of Bridgenorth, and west northwest of Halfpenny Green, and it looks like this. It's got some straight edges to it, and it's quite a distinctive shape. There's a road here which I suppose envelops it, and you've got this sort of whole area here which seems to be pointing to it, but you should be able to spot that. The difficulty is that these are all north oriented, and we could be coming from different directions, so we need to bear that in mind if we are going to attempt any of these. The only local hazards I could identify there were the Halfpenny Green traffic, and that's about it really, I think. So this is again going to be part of the pack that goes into the club room and onto the computer, just to give people things to consider. We're always supposed to look at threat and error management whenever we fly, and on this particular case, in this particular instance, if we're looking at cross-country flying, there are things we need to consider and what we're going to do to manage them. So I'm not going to go through those, but that's what will be on the pack. So it's just things to get people prompting of things they should be considering before they actually leave the ground, just to allow for any of these situations. And there's some errors as well, what they should consider and things to bear in mind during their flight. So where do we go from here? Well, there is a Lakes turn point file Derek quite kindly produced a table of all of the locations in terms of a lat long coordinates, and I've converted those into the different forms. They've got different decimal forms and hours, minutes, second forms of the coordinates. So I've converted those, and Tiago very kindly put that into a file that we can put onto the Kobo, onto XeSaw, and they are as yet untested. We only had that just before we went to Sutton Bank, and by the time we got back, there was very little opportunity to test them out with the motor glider, but that's the intention. There's also a suggestion that, well, why should we have a turn point file on a navigational device? This is all supposed to be, as Derek pointed out in his presentation, I think it was last week, that or some weeks ago, that we're trying to encourage people to be able to navigate, and to navigate you need a compass and a map and some situational awareness. I agree to an extent, but I think there's also an opportunity to help people along with sort of confirming where they think they are, and particularly if you do get lost or into a position where you don't know where the lake is and you don't know what to do next. It's a good way of backing up your opinions and your thoughts on where you are. But also, maybe we should be using this to develop more of a cross-country discipline. I know that Paul Witters has been trying to encourage more of a cross-country element to our flying, and get us more prominent in that space. And this could be a way of helping to develop that. So it's not just a case of getting into the aircraft and then saying, oh, it's going to be a good, but once you're in the air going, oh, I think I'll go to Cockmere. If you decide that is what you're going to do, then that is your task for the day. And rather than just being blown about by the wind and going wherever it takes you, to actually have an objective in mind and to have planned your flight beforehand accordingly, would probably not be a bad thing to instill in people, so that when they do go from further cross countries, they are doing stuff that they're already familiar with in terms of their planning and preparation. So yeah, the next opportunity you fly, don't bimble, have a purpose. So do something with your flight, and doing something with your flight could actually get you some recognition and some sense of achievement, and to help you to develop confidence for bigger tasks. And what I would like is feedback on not only this presentation, but when the pack goes out, I'll freely ask people to scribble or write on the paper what they think is wrong or what they think could be improved, so that it can be a lasting, ongoing artifact for the club. So that feedback could also include nominating local turn points. I've already mentioned that Cat Lake instead of Ruffield. There could be other lakes that are more readily visible, or would be in addition to the ones we've got. And as I say, your views on what I've produced. The other thing is for people to develop their own tasks. So that's Derek's original drawing showing what the opportunities are just from our base using those particular lakes. But within that construct, we could develop lots of different triangles ourselves and determine what it is we wanted to do. And they could be as simple or as complex as we want, really. I'd like to see the person who manages to get around that. It's probably John McLaughlin. But yeah, it's up to us really to develop the lakes and actually make it work for us and make it more prominent within the club. So that's it. I hope I've not gone over the hour. Just under the hour, that's not bad. I'm quite happy with that. There you go. Any thoughts or questions?